I'm Mark Grayson, the founding director of Trinity Spiritual Center, which has been a project that Trinity has launched to create a community alongside Trinity to support spiritual seekers, regardless of what belief system they might have. And that intention is genuine and sincere. There is no proselytizing here. We are bringing together people who are looking for meaning and purpose, a way to strengthen their contemplative life so that we might build our inner world and express that world out into the universe in a way that has positive impact. And I can think of no speaker that we could have invited here better than Catherine to represent, in fact, that intent, because the work that she's going to share with us tonight is all about uncovering what is inside of us and making it present and active in the world in ways in which, for many of us, it is not now. So I'm thrilled to have this opportunity to introduce you to Catherine Shainberg, who has the distinction of earning not one but two master's degrees in art history, one from the Sorbonne and the other from the School of the Louvre, right? And then somehow, which I'm going to ask her to tell you this story, she managed to find her way to New York City, where she earned a PhD in psychology and started the School of Images. But all of that happened by way of Jerusalem. So we'll hear that story in a second, but I just want to do some housekeeping before we dive in. Typically what we do in an evening is have some conversation back and forth, and then at some point during the evening, we break and open up the mic for questions from the floor or from the Zoom, participants in the Zoom room. And sometimes at the end, we go into a guided meditation. Tonight, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to really go with the flow of the conversation back and forth. When we got together on the Cape this summer, I think we had a 2-hour conversation in one breath. So I think it's quite possible that we will be going quite back and forth a lot. But during the course of the evening, we'll take a break now and then to do some exercises to demonstrate the work that Catherine has come here to share with us. So, you know, you don't sit back too much because you're going to be actively participating in this evening. And then at some point, as we get towards the end of the evening, we will stop and take some questions. So, with that, how the heck did you get from Paris to New York by way of Jerusalem?
Like Big Ben, I really come from London, but I'm French. So it all started in London when I was a tiny, tiny child, dreaming. And I was doing a lot of work with people when I was really 2, 3, 4 years old. I was helping people using images. Using, for example, there was a homeless lady who lived across the street. And every night I would stand at the window and wave, and I would surround her with a blanket of blue light. And every night she would wave to me, and I was sure that she'd be safe because I had surrounded her with light. So I did that when I was 3, 4 years old, and that work continued for many years. And I thought that I would share with you this story because Queen Elizabeth has died, and when I was 5, King George died. And when he died, we went to the funeral procession, and I, as a 5-year-old, had a very real experience that wouldn't be real for anybody else, but it was real for me. I walked across to the coffin, lifted the hood of the coffin, took King George's hand and took him up to heaven, which created incredible fracas, as they would say in French, and I was called to the living room and told I was a liar. So after that, I chose to hide my proclivities. But when it came time to try to figure out what I wanted to do, I could only think of images, because that's what I was doing all the time, right? Creating images, but images that were healing and helpful. So I went to art history. And I was actually absolutely fascinated by the fact that if you took, for example, a painting of Matisse and you take out the lemon in the painting changes totally. And that showed me that I could use images to help people. So I tried to do my PhD on that, and I was refused. So I left that, and I started wondering, because I couldn't imagine what I was going to do. And the other thing that was happening to me always as a child were voices. And voices were telling me what to do. So the voice was now saying, you got to go to the Middle East. Well, when you're a young student of 20, why not? You know, you grab your backpack and you go off. So I went all over the Middle East, had many adventures, and I still didn't know why I was going to the Middle East. Then I heard a voice that said, now you go to Israel. Well, that was really way beyond my comfort zone, because at the time I was not involved in anything Jewish, and I wasn't interested. But the voice said, you've got to go to Israel. And my whole life I've followed the voice. So I went to Israel. I have to tell you that this was a very big decision, because I'd just gotten a full scholarship to Harvard. So I dropped the scholarship because the voice was loud, and I went to Israel, and I had no idea what I was doing there. I was on a kibbutz in the Negev, and I arrived on the kibbutz very soon after that was Yom Kippur War. So it was a very dramatic event to arrive in Israel and be, you know, see what was happening, because the tanks were going down near the kibbutz where I was, bumper to bumper for weeks, and all the men had gone off to the war. So after the war, I met a whole a group of French people. I'm French, so I sat with them on the kibbutz, and during a conversation about Jerusalem, I asked, how is Jerusalem? How do you like it? What's the French community? And they told me, the French community is really held by one lady, and her name is Colette. And then my whole being exploded into light. I can't explain it any other way. My whole head, my whole body exploded in light, and I knew I had to go and see her. So I left the kibbutz. I had no money, I had nothing, but I left the kibbutz, went to Jerusalem, and it was impossible to go and see her, because, you know, obstacles are necessary on the road, right? So there was an obstacle. And the obstacle was very big, because the man who talked to me about her was afraid of her. She was a queen, very dramatic person, but I didn't know anything about her at all. Anyway, it took a number of persuasive encounters for this man to take me to see Colette. I arrive at her place, and she's sitting like a queen in her garden, right? It was a beautiful garden. And she's a very beautiful woman, very distinguished. And she looks me in the eyes and she says, what do you want? I cannot explain to you why this happened, because it just came out of my mouth. I want you to tell me how images move people. And she said, "I've waited for you a long time." So that was the beginning of my apprenticeship. And then I found out she was a great Kabbalist, a great teacher. People came from all over the world to see her. But I was 28. I was a little girl, really. And I had found somebody who was talking my language. It was totally astonishing. Now, I could stop here, but we discussed this just before, and I'm going to go on. A year or two later, my aunt comes to visit. My mother was anti-Semitic, so she never came to visit. But my aunt came, and I said to her, "Oh, you have to come and see my teacher." So we go off to see my teacher, and my aunt walks into the living room. My teacher's sitting there. My teacher gets up and says, "Oh, oh," and they hug. They hug and they embrace. I said, "This is really crazy. What is happening here?" My mother lived across the street from Colette in Algiers, right? Went to the same school as her, right? Now, maybe as we go along, I might tell you more about what I discovered about what happened 800 years ago in her family and in mine. But maybe we stop here. If you want.
For now.
Anyway, it's a
For
dream
now.
story, right?
It's a wonderful story. And the reason why I love starting there with you is that it's a beautiful illustration of the framework that you have developed that is accessible to all of us. If we work a little bit at learning how to unlock the power of our dreams so that they can have that kind of, or the images in our lives so that they can have that kind of transformative work in our lives. So what I think it would be useful to do at this point would be to just describe a little bit for everybody how, within the framework that you've developed, that is so informed by the Kabbalah, and also what you've learned in Western psychology. Let's have a conversation about the way in which dreams function differently in those two systems, and how or imagery functions differently, and just dig into that piece of your work so that we can get a sort of baseline understanding of what it's all about.
Well, I mean, psychology doesn't use dreams much, right? It's a little part in some psychological systems. They're interested in dreams, but this is not the focus, specifically the focus. It's more the focus in Jungian psychology. In Kabbalah, the ancient Kabbalah, the most ancient Kabbalah, is really about gazing inward, looking in, right? And when we look in the way that I'm going to show you, which is very, very simple, anybody can do it, you ask a question, you look in, and the subconscious wakes up. We need to activate the subconscious, right? Now, if you go to bed at night, you're going to do what we hear of in the Bible, in Genesis. In the second sentence of the Bible, God hovers over the abyss, or over the waters, the dark waters. And what happens immediately after that? What happens? Light. Light appears. Now that's an extraordinary statement, and I always take things at their face value. If I look in, light appears. And I have to ask myself, this is very strange, because sun, the moon, the stars are only created 4 days later. So where does this light come from? What is this light? And I can do that. I can look in, or I do that every night when I sleep. I hover over the darkness, and light appears. Not only light, but something very much more important, an order appears. Now, if we read Genesis, the order is that suddenly the waters above and the waters below, the firmament appears, right? The vegetation, the land, the dry land, the ocean, the trees, the vegetation, order appears. Now, if you take that at face value, you can look inside yourselves, right? And let's say I'm asking a question, should I take this job? I go to bed and fall asleep, and poof, light appears, right, in my REM moment during the night. And because I've asked a question, and it's a burning question, some order will appear. Think of the subconscious as your nature, and more than your nature, a great river of experiences that you've had for all of your lifetime, and family experiences too, family stories. So all of these bits of information, right, are floating in that great river. And then I ask the question, and puff, light appears and an order appears, and the order is your dream. It's going to give you an answer to your question. Now, if you're very clear and you've practiced this for a long, long time, then the answer is perfectly clear. If you're not very clear, well, we have to do a little bit of practice, right? Which means that your dreams may appear a little cloudy or a little disorienting, or you don't understand what they mean, right? So we do this work of really paying attention to our dreams, and in the morning you write them down, you start to take a look at them, right? That's one way of hovering over your own ocean of the subconscious, right? Another way is to do it in the daytime, right? You have had this experience, I know. You ask the question, should I take this job? And you're walking down the street, and suddenly, poof, you got a vision. Has it happened to anybody here? Yeah. I'm always afraid because to me it's obvious. It might not be obvious for everybody, but if it has happened to you, puff, it appears, and you have an image in the daytime. And maybe the image is showing you a dark office with a dirty window. What would that tell you? Don't take the job. Right. I mean, I'm being simplistic, but it actually can happen very much like that, right? So that's the beginning, if you want, of understanding what the practice is about. You have inside of you all the answers. Around you, and with science as it's so developed today, you have a lot of facts. But it's good to gather your facts. You do your due diligence, but then you really have to turn in and ask the question. If you ask the question and you've practiced doing that, you're going to get an answer. And the inside is always going to show you the truth. Do you know? Do you agree? Do you know that?
Well, I think one of the things that you wrote extensively about in the book is that these three different layers of consciousness, the reality, right? There's the conscious mind, then the subconscious, and then the superconscious, right? And I think we all know that much as we'd like to imagine that we're rational human beings and we're sort of making our decisions with our conscious mind, I know that I can speak for myself. That is just a complete myth, because really all my decisions are being made somewhere else entirely, and then I spend a lot of time rationalizing the decision that I've made. And So what I love about this model is that it really acknowledges the reality that we're living, which is that maybe 5% of what we're doing is with our conscious minds, and 95% of it is beneath the surface in the subconscious. And so really paying attention to the light show within us and bringing that forward in a way that it's a little bit more visible and usable in our lives is probably a good thing.
Well, it's useful. You'll know if you have to take the job or go out with this boyfriend. Maybe it's a bad idea, right? But the dream will show you definitely. But it's much more than that. It's as you have three layers. This conscious mind. We live in the conscious mind all the time. It's a rational, linear world, causal world. Then you have your subconscious. Now, I always look at it, and I always explain it to my students like that. It's an ocean, and like the oceans today, there's a lot of garbage, right? And that's good. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to clear the garbage, right? And one of the very important things in the lineage that I represent is that the ancient Kabbalistic lineage that I represent is that if you see the garbage, you can clear it. So I can get up in the morning and there was a dirty table or blocked toilets. I can go back into the imagery and clear it. So this is part of the practice of developing the ancient Kabbalah. So maybe I should get back to the Kabbalah in a moment. If we clear and clear and clear, you're going to see that we get to the superconscious, which is really your soul, and it's really always filled with light. So it's really, the more you do this work, it's a work of enlightenment, right? It's a very powerful and simple road to enlightenment. And many of you are probably Christians, maybe, right? For the Christian saints, this is what they were doing. Many of the great Christian saints, right? Looking in, creating more and more and more light, and finding their way to enlightened visions, if you want, right? So Kabbalah is really open to absolutely everybody, the ancient Kabbalah, because there are many different forms of Kabbalah that developed afterwards. But the most ancient one you have to think of as walking in the desert, and there's nothing there, so what are you going to think about? Well, about the mystery of the stars and the sky and the vastness of nature, and you end up becoming a mystic. But as you walk and you're asking the question, well, who made all of this? You're beginning to have, visions. So the ancient Kabbalah was really gazing inward. And you can do that even as you walk in the desert with eyes open. You can be gazing at what's around you, and it becomes a part of you. And this is a mystical experience. So the ancient Kabbalah means to receive. And all of those images that you receive when you ask the question, well, who made the stars and the moon? So you're asking that question, and the subconscious is that incredible, powerful force inside of you that starts to gather together, find its form, and speak to you, right? So that's the ancient Kabbalah. After that, there were a lot of Kabbalistic systems that became quite complex. Maybe because a lot of men were doing Kabbalah. I'm joking, but the women were apparently not doing Kabbalah, but the men were. The women weren't allowed to think that way, which is a joke. But anyway, so the ancient Kabbalah is very, very simple. And I've outlined for you quickly what it's about. Yeah.
So, as we are having this conversation, I'm realizing that, sometimes there's a tendency to, at least in the West, to try to analyze dreams and figure out what they mean or interpret them or even apply systems of symbolism to dreams. But what you're talking about tonight is really using the imagery of the dreams as almost a language that's speaking to us, that we can begin to become conversant in, so that it has the power to unleash the things that are inside of us that are wanting to be made present in the world. Is that sort of it?
We could say so, yeah. I mean, the original language, anybody's read the story of the Tower of Babel? Well, it's a one page that you can read in the Bible, but before there was one language. And then after the Tower of Babel, they build a tower because they want to reach to God and become as gods, right? So they build the tower, and God comes down and says, this is very silly. And so I'm going to confuse you. And suddenly everybody's talking different languages. That's basically the story, right? There's much more to it, but the original language disappears. And we have many, many languages. Now, if you look around the world, you have many, many, many languages, right? And many, many misunderstandings, because people don't even understand themselves or each other in the language that they speak. But one thing that we always understand is an image. And we can't say that why we understand it, but especially mythical images are very, very powerful. And we look at them again and again, and it's like a diamond. I can look at one facet and it means this to me, and then Mark looks at it here and it means a little something there to Mark, and it means something to you and to you. And as we go around the room, turning this dream or this diamond around, we have many different ways of understanding the same thing. Creates many layers of living, of experiencing that are powerful. And ultimately, we come to the truth of it. The only way we could put this into words is poetically. To try to analyze a dream is really to misunderstand the language itself, because it doesn't work that way, right? You can't understand an image analytically. It's as if you're looking at a butterfly, and the butterfly is wonderful and delightful and fills you with joy, and then you take a pin and pin it. Then the butterfly is dead, so you can analyze it. But what have you lost? Right? So, what? Their life, right? And the beauty and the joy of watching this butterfly move, right? So this inspiration is so profound, and that's what we've lost lately more and more. As people are very much with their computers and their iPads and their iPhones, and right, and they're losing this incredible power of life around, or life inside of them. Because I wake up in the morning, and in fact, I'll tell you a little dream I had yesterday. It was just a window, and I was looking in the window, and I was experiencing intense happiness. Can't explain to you why. because there was nothing that told me what the happiness was about, but it was intense happiness. So we cannot pin that down rationally. But that's what we're made of as human beings, right? Don't you think so?
Yes.
Yeah.
So maybe, we've talked a lot about dreams, and the power of imagery, and that it's possible to actually work with images as we are awake. So what do you say, maybe now's the time to try and do an exercise with everybody, to just give everybody a taste of what it's like to do this kind of work.
Okay.
Okay.
Are you up, Fred? Yes. Yeah? So the way we do this, you know, in the Tibetan temples, or not temples, what are they called? The Tibetan monasteries. The young ones are sitting in lotus at night, and they put a lit candle on their heads, and they have to meditate all night. If they start to fall asleep, then the candle drips, right? So we sit up straight. We don't let the candle drip on our head, right? Close your eyes. And you're going to breathe out very slowly through an open mouth, seeing the number 3. Breathe out and see a number 2. Breathe out and see the number 1, tall, clear, and bright. Imagine yourself standing in a meadow on a sunny day, and your hands are loose, and you feel something being put into your hand. When you look, you see that it's a key. Take a look at the key. What kind of key is it? What does it look like? What kind of, is it of metal, is it? Now breathe out and ask, where does this key go? Where's the lock? Find the lock to which the key belongs. Now it could be anything, right? It could be a door, it could be a casket. Just watch. Now breathe out, and when you're ready, open the lock. And take a look at what is revealed. And breathing out, open your eyes. So we can't ask everybody, but I'm sure that everybody has something different. In fact, I did that once, and it was on Zoom, and there were, I don't know, 150 people, and there were at least 85 people writing to me about what they'd seen. And none of them had seen the same thing. So does somebody want to say? Yes.
I saw trees.
Uh-huh. What kind of trees?
Like pine trees.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very uniform.
And it's a forest?
Forest, yes.
Okay. Does it feel dark or does it feel light?
I felt light.
Uh-huh. And just forest all around, or just a line?
There was a gate.
So you're opening the gate?
No, the gate was opened, and then there were trees on either side of the gate. It's like an entrance.
I see. So what is your key like?
Oh, a brass key, kind of nondescript.
So not modern, not old?
I'm sorry?
Modern, old?
More modern, I think.
Okay. Did you open the gate with the key?
I did, yes, I did.
Okay. So now you have a path. And how do you feel about taking that path?
I'm up for it.
Okay. So this is the beginning of the path. Now we can explore, we can go through the forest of images and explore where your path takes you. Right? Yeah. One more? Yes.
I had a beautiful old-fashioned key, antique, sort of, the double things on the loop handle, and when you said, "Where's the lock?" I just envisioned my heart that was kind of deep, deep maroon, and the keyhole was right in the middle. And when I unlocked it, just these like light and pinks and all these things just started shooting out. It just felt open. It was beautiful.
Good.
Lovely.
So now your heart is open, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe it had felt a little closed before?
Yeah.
Had it? Yeah. That's what it shows. Now, generally, when I work with the students, because we do a lot of exercises. This is just one in thousands, right? To be able to open up your experience and your capacity to grow. Because now you've got a path. And you can take that path, and you can go to bed tonight and ask to go down that path, right? So it's the beginning, if you want, of now your heart is open, and things can happen that are different than before. The other thing that's so important in the image is that there's no discussing it. It just is, right? And the other thing is, it's not something that, you don't need to repeat it again and again and again. All you have to do is, if you're feeling a little closed again, you remember. And the image itself starts your growth towards more freedom, right? Anybody had a difficult experience? That's good. If you have a difficult experience, it's an opportunity to clear the garbage, right? Yeah.
I guess it was difficult, but it was odd. Like you, I also saw, an old style brass key, but as you asked where it belonged, it got smaller. And it clearly was in the entrance to some kind of cabinet lock. Right? I opened the cabinet door, and I ended up in the bottom of a well. And it was dry, and it had a ladder, and I'm going to guess about 20 feet above me. Oh, sorry, it didn't have a ladder. And about 20 feet above me, I saw a beautiful blue sky. And I thought, how am I going to get up there? I really like to get up there. And then the ladder appeared. And I started to go up the ladder when we ended the exercise. But I went into it kind of like, oh man, I am in deep doo here as well.
But did you need to go back and come up completely?
I will.
Okay.
Thank you.
So it's active also, because there we see what I need to do. I need to do a little bit more. I need to walk on this path, or I need to clear this up. And as we go, it's not, we're talking about psychology or this. The difference is, I'm not telling you what to do. I've opened up a window for you. Let's say I've given you the key, but that's just a beginning, right? And then your inside starts to talk and show you what you need. So that's very different than saying, well, let's discuss your relationship to your mother, right? Not that it's useful certainly at the beginning, especially with younger people. To discuss their relationship with their mother or their father, right?
Their father.
It might be useful, but not for too long, because then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Whereas if I look at the image, where's my mother? Well, she's stuck in my liver there, and she doesn't really need to be there. So I'll ask her very nicely to leave, and I'll clear the area. And it is so simple, and it is so effective. Because the moment the liver is cleared, you're going to feel different.
So now we're sort of into another topic that I really wanted to explore with you. And we did talk a lot about, I had the opportunity to spend a couple hours with Catherine, as I said earlier, this summer. But I think it would be useful to talk about the difference between emotions and feelings within the context of this work, because we're touching on now the fact that we all have within us sort of deeply embedded in our bodies and in our experience emotions that we carry from some traumatic experience or some relationships or whatever, and we carry them, and those narratives that we tell ourselves about those emotions can be completely debilitating because they become sort of deeply ingrained, and they get triggered, and they happen. Oh, so talk to us about how this work can actually take on the challenge of kind of helping us manage those. Manage isn't the right word, but work with the emotions so that they become feelings or more positive energies in our lives.
Do you think that emotions are rational?
No.
So I think that's the first thing. So where do they come from if they're not rational? Well, they come from the subconscious, right? They come from your body. The subconscious is your embodiment. It's all of your experiences, and your emotions are part of that. Well, I'm suddenly reacting because you said something to me about the cheese on the table, and it made me very angry. Okay. Well, where's the anger? So you look in, and well, it's in my stomach there. And can you look in? Yes. Well, what do you see? How old are you? Well, I'm 5 years old. What happened? Well, I'm sitting at a table and somebody's been asking me about the cheese, but I wasn't hearing. And my father slaps me. It's as simple as that. It happens suddenly and immediately that when you look in, or somebody looks in there, and you ask them, well, where is it? What does it look like? They're going to see it. Well, I'm 5 years old and my father slaps me over the cheese. I hate cheese since then, and I have a trauma, right, that is particularly located and has a particular time. I'm 5, so I haven't grown from there. That little 5-year-old has not grown. Right? So, very simple. Again, we can, using images, it's very simple. Could the little one come out and express herself, and if she'd like to scream at her father that she hates cheese since he slapped her, and she hates him because he slapped her, and and all of this clearing happens very fast, very simply, and then surprisingly, the little girl grows up. It happens. I mean, I've done it thousands of times because I've worked with many thousands of people. And the little girl grows up, and that part that was stuck grows up and reintegrates the rest of you. And so you're more fulfilled, you're more enlightened if you want, right? So we're clearing the garbage in that way. Now, it does sound like we're talking a lot about the psychological aspects of it. But let's get to your question, which is, when you have an emotion, what do you feel in your body? Is it expansive? Is it constrictive? What does it feel like? usually constrictive. Can you think of an emotion that is not constrictive? Huh? It's not an emotion. And this is the important thing, is that in the literature today, there's no distinction between emotion and feeling. Now, in the olden times, feeling was called virtue. Right? And since we're here in the temple, if you want, it's a kind of a nice thing. It was called virtue. So joy, right? Serenity, those are virtues, right? But anger, it constricts. Fear pulls you back. Jealousy.
Very specific locations, too.
Very
like
specific.
Anger's up here.
Anger, the French say, anger, the mustard rises to my nose. That's what the French say, right?
And fear.
Fear,
Just
pulling
lower.
back in, right?
Yeah.
It's, you will watch, and I have my students watch, right? Watch for a week and see how it moves. Now, it's not going to, you're not going to be able to change that unless you see how it moves. Now, every feeling is, if I say, well, let's do it. Close your eyes. Yeah, it's much easier. And breathe out slowly. Counting from 3 to 1. Seeing the numbers. See the one tall, clear, and bright. Go back to a time, a moment, an experience of great anger. And just feel it in your body, just for a few seconds, feeling how it moves in your body, where it starts, what color it is. And see the circumstance of who you're angry at and why you're angry, right? And now breathing out, in anger, remember love. What has happened in your body? And breathing out, open your eyes. So, anybody could say what happens in your body?
Release.
Okay, is there color? Is there, where does it start, the anger?
Oh, the anger does not,
Yeah.
The anger starts here, goes up.
Yeah.
Red and it's orange.
So when you say release, what are you doing here? What's this?
It's relaxing, it's opening up.
It's opening up. Okay. What about you?
It was red, I wanted to cry.
It was red and I want to cry?
Then I was very tense.
Yeah. And then when we say in anger, remember love, what happens?
Turned white.
White and relaxed.
White
And relaxed. Good. Good.
More relaxing.
Right. Anybody have something different?
I found myself feeling like expanding in circles, kind of. The energy was going outwards and was rounder instead of...
The energy expands, right? And you'll always be able to tell the difference, because if you're expanding, it's a feeling. If you're constricting, you can be pretty sure, even if you want to pretend that it's not, but it's an emotion, right? It's in the body, and we forget to understand that what is most important is what we feel in our bodies. We forget that. So again, the ancient Kabbalah is there as a guide to clear us more and more, to expand more and more, to be more in the world of feeling. And the world of feeling is the world of virtue, is the world of transformation of the old traumas, right? So that we're free. And so it is an inner road of inner development, if you want, right?
And if the emotions are lodged inside our bodies, then is it possible, as you're working with the imagery, that you can begin to dislodge the emotion so it's less of a pain point? Because I know there are places that a massage therapist always finds in my body that's a knot that nobody can get rid of. And so the question is really, could that possibly be where I'm holding in some emotion or some experience that could be released in some way by working with this imagery?
It can. But what we don't know, we never know, is when you're ready to do that. We can work towards it, we can unpeel the onion if you want, but we never know when it's going to happen. Right? And whatever a psychologist tells you that they think they know, they don't. I have students that I've had for 25 years, and suddenly we do a little exercise and something opens up that they had never seen before. So it's really like many, many layers of living and experience and emotions that have been held, and maybe at that moment they're ready. Now we can hasten it by practicing, right? So we practice the work of looking in, of exploring the world of the body. But again, when I say the body is not just here, right? Because the moment you start feeling, then your body expands. The body is much, much wider than you realize. Its senses spread out to infinity. And so we see with dreamers, for example, and I'm sure you're all dreamers, so you've all had this experience, that you wake up one day and you think of this friend you haven't talked to in 25 years. And 2 minutes later, the phone rings. How is that possible, right? This is what I call a dream field. We are much more powerful than we realize, right? And I'm not saying that for us to be big, strong, muscled people walking around with an ego, but simply that we have many more talents than we realize, right? So I can think of somebody, and they're going to call me, because I've set the intent. And it travels on these great highways of dream, if you want, of my body spreading out and sending love messages to somebody. And sure enough, an hour or two later, they call. You've all had this experience, right?
Well, there's another thing that I wanted to ask you about. And this comes back to as an agent on Hollywood, so any credibility that I have is gone now. And one of the things that I just couldn't believe, because day in and day out, people would come in and hear pitches for projects. I can't even begin to tell you how many times come in with exactly the same idea. And they had not discussed it with anybody. It was top secret. I couldn't talk to anybody. And I must have heard it 4 or 5 times. And it was like all of a sudden, people got this idea at this, and it was always a brilliant idea. But it said to me that there was some way in which we're connected. I don't know how, but we're all sort of operating on this field and there's some kind of exchange of information going on. I don't know how that plays into what you're talking about, but.
Completely. I mean, I call it the dream field, right? And we have our own dream field, but we also have a family dream field with all of its stories and its dramas, tragedies, and pleasures, right? We also have a national dream field. Look what's happening in our national dream field these days, right? There's a little bit of correction that needs to happen there. But because I believe so strongly in the dreaming, I think dreamers can help to correct this, right? This, it's a global dream field. We are all one. And this is something that I can say to you because you seem to be understanding what I am talking about. We are really all one. We are all made of the same energy, right? Star energy if you want, right? We're all made of that same energy. And we have a particular blueprint. So this blueprint has legs and arms. The mushroom has a different kind of blueprint, or the tree has a different kind of blueprint. And when you're looking at your dreams, you're looking at your blueprints, or your blueprint moving. And if you are living in the level of the dream, you are able to co-create or interact, if you want, with the dream. And you start, of course, at first with yourself, which is, well, I had a nightmare last night. I don't like that, right? So I can go back into the nightmare and start responding. I'll give you a nightmare. This was a man who dreamt, well, I'm wondering which one to tell you, actually. But this was a man who dreamt that he saw his tombstone. And he saw the date of his death written on the tombstone. So that was very frightening because the death was about 3 weeks later. Talking of death, that's why I'm thinking about it, right? And I remember that because I was a young student sitting with my teacher. I sat there for 10 years, every single day, right? So I really imbued, it was like osmosis, right? And so he was terrified. It's 17th of September, I'm gonna die. She said, no, just close your eyes. Close your eyes, take a hammer and a chisel, and hammer out the date. Put a new date. So he put a new date, right? To look into the dreaming, what's the new date? He got a new date. On the 17th of September, he had a huge accident. A big truck destroyed his car, totaled his car, and he didn't have a scratch. He came out of it without a scratch. So the dreaming had seen, now that's another conversation that we can talk about, right? Yeah. How come the dreaming can see 3 weeks in advance that he's going to have an accident, right? But the correction changed the course. You cannot change anything with your mind. You can only change from the subconscious.
So now you're on to the topic, which I really don't like to bring up, but manifestation, which is a concept that is very challenging and I think often misunderstood, thanks to The Secret and a lot of other pop culture misappropriation of the word. So I was wondering maybe if you could just go into that a little bit more deeply, because we're talking about co-creating at some level, and yet on the one hand and yet on the other hand, it somehow needs to arise out of the blueprint, the soul print. Otherwise, it's not going to happen.
Well, we can talk about The Secret. Can you keep a secret? It's bullshit. Because you cannot will this. It doesn't work with will, right? And when I'm saying by will, I mean fantasy. So the fantasy that I'm going to become president of the United States, I'm a woman, why not? Let's go, right? I'm going to become president of the United States, and I'm going to put all my intent into that. Why isn't it going to work? Well, I'm 77 years old. It's a bit late, right? But it's not because of that. It's because I've never dreamt of being president of the United States. Never occurred to me. Now, I did dream of doing the work that I'm doing when I was a tiny child. So that's the difference, right? If you dream it, it can become manifest. So you've got to ask your dreaming if it's fantasy or if it's the truth. So if I say, like in The Secret, I want $10 million, here's my check, $10 million, it's not going to work. Unless I look inside and the inside says, Alibaba's cave, thousands of coins, golden coins, then the inside is saying, yeah, you're meant to be a millionaire or a multimillionaire, right? But if the dreaming doesn't tell you that, then it's fantasy, and you will kill yourself trying to get there, and you won't get there. Or you will get there and you'll lose it all, because it's not meant to be. Now, this is a complex, as you said, very complex thing. Where does the dreaming come from? Why are you dreaming this? I had a little friend, he was 2 years old, and he'd sit in front of TV and look at the stock exchange. 2 years old. And we would say, you don't want to see the stock exchange, you want to see Bugs Bunny. Let's turn the... No, no, no. He wanted to see the stock exchange, right? Today he's a very, very successful banker. So something about his soul has that particular imprint. Now, we could go into this for a long, long time. Where does this come from, right? Where does this come that one of you is an accountant and another one is a mathematician and a third one is a dance teacher and has always wanted to be a dance teacher? It's very mysterious. But your dreaming will show you what it is that you need to do, right? If you follow the dreaming, your life will be happy. If you don't follow the dreaming, my mother tried very hard. She said, you're doing this on purpose to annoy me. Would you please, please go to Polytechnique? That was where all the men were, right? You go to Polytechnique, you're a pretty girl, you'll meet a wonderful man, and it'll be solved. The issue will be solved. And of course, I went to art history, and she said, you're really doing that to annoy me. So when I went to Israel, it was even worse. You definitely are doing that to annoy me. And unfortunately, I went on annoying her for quite some time until she finally came around to it, and she would call me and tell me her dreams. So I thought that was wonderful, right? So, manifestation. You've got to ask your mysterious dreaming what you're meant to be doing, right? And then you follow that. And one of the great difficulties that we all have is that we don't want to follow that. We want something else, because the neighbor has it, right? They have a beautiful Cadillac or Bentley or Mercedes-Benz or something, right? And I want that, right? But the dreaming is all for the Subaru. So, if you try to get the top-notch car there, you're going to exhaust yourself.
So what do you think? Is this a good time to try and do another exercise? Is there one that comes to mind at this point?
Do you want to do another exercise? Let me see, why don't we, maybe we do a bridge. You like that one,
I
right?
do like that one.
Yeah. So this is a little exercise I give to couples, to people who fight, because you know, you all do that, we all do that. We go into the kitchen and we fight, right? We fight in the kitchen. And then the next night, we fight again in the kitchen, and it's always the same thing. We're repeating the same thing, right? And so I have cured a number of my people, couples, by telling them, don't go to the kitchen, go back into your room, and you're going to do this, okay? So close your eyes, and since we all fight with somebody, this you can use, right? Uncross your legs, close your eyes, and breathe out slowly 3 times, counting from 3 to 1, seeing the numbers, see the one, tall, clear, and bright. Now, ask yourself, who is it that I'm always having difficulty with? Could be my son, it could be my partner, it could be a friend I'm always having difficulties with. Somebody that I care for. Now breathe out and imagine that instead of going to the kitchen, you take 3 steps back into your bedroom and close the door. Sit down quietly in your bedroom. Breathe out and look into your heart and ask to see the color of your love for that person. Once you've seen the color of your love for that person, breathe out and imagine sending that color out of your heart in a great bridge over to the other person. Through the walls, just this great bridge of light to touch the other person's heart. When the color enters into that other person's heart, just watch what happens and watch what comes back to you. You can respond. You can send on that bridge your flowers, songs, words of love. And watch what comes back to you and what it feels like. And breathing out, you can ask for this to continue. But you don't need to focus on it anymore, just breathing out, open your eyes. All right. Simple. But don't go back to the kitchen right away, right? Give it a little time. But it's astonishing that I've seen it again and again, the couples get back into love. Anybody wants to say? No? Well, it's simple, right? But it's very, very effective. In fact, one of my friends was going to be here tonight and she couldn't make it. And she had come to me after a terrible divorce. Her 9-year-old son had become so violent that the son was put to live with the father, and she hadn't seen him in months. And she was really frantic. And so we did this simple exercise. That's all we did. She went home, and there was a time when we had answering machines. That was a long time ago. We had answering machines, right? And on the answering machine, a little voice, "Mom, Mom, I haven't seen you in a long time. I'd like to see you." So it had taken a minute. because basically when she got home, he had called literally when she was in the office with me, right? So it's very quick and very powerful, right? The image is very effective because you're moving energy. You're moving energy in a particular form. We can't do it with our minds. We can analyze it and all the rest, but we can't move the energy, right? But with the image, you can move the energy. And that, energy is all over the world. We are made of energy ourselves, right? In a particular shape that we've embodied for this, our life, right? And again, we can also change our energetic form. But that's for another conversation.
But then if that's the case, it would seem that, in fact, the image has the power to physically heal as well.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
I can talk about that. With the body, you can talk to the body. The body is conscious. And that's what the doctors forget, right? They forget that the body is conscious. The body is conscious. So you can ask the body, if you talk to the body in image, because the body is a form. It understands image, right? It doesn't understand language too well. It does understand language that says, I hate you. I hate your nose. I hate your buttocks. So I hate... Right? And this many people live with, unfortunately. But we can change that. To give you an example, there was my first case when I was a young student with Colette. She sent me a lady whose hands had been deformed by radiation in a lab, and so I was faced with, what am I going to do with this lady? Right? I had her close her eyes and remake her hands in light. It was very simple. Just blow blue light from the sky into your arm and remake the fingers. This woman couldn't go out to dinner because she felt that people were looking at her all the time. But after that, she never had a problem. And I knew her for 35 years after that. She never had a problem. And what was even more interesting is that I never looked at her hands as if they were tortured, and something had changed in the hands, right? Because it's energetic. And so as she had created an energy that was more in tune with her blueprint, the original blueprint, that's what people subconsciously were seeing. Right? But that's, again, we can talk about illnesses. Illnesses are diagnoses, right, that the doctors give us. And sometimes we're meant to go and it's the time to go and the body agrees with that. But at other times, we're not. And if you only look at the symptoms, you're not dealing with the whole energetic pattern, if you want. So we work on that. We work on the 4 bodies, because you've got 4 bodies: a physical body, an emotional body, a mental body, and spirit. And if you work on all 4 of them, using again the image, working with the original language, the body finds a way to repair itself. I couldn't tell you that I have a student of mine who is now 6 years free of pancreatic cancer. And we have many. So I'm not wanting to, I hate to say that because it's like trying to say, hey, look what we've done, right? But these people work on themselves as a whole body. They work on their emotions, they work on their mental attitudes, they work on their spirit. And when we return the body to its, let's say, to a pause, then all of these disorders come back into place, right? So that's the original way of working. It's, we could say it's you know, the ancient Kabbalah is more shamanic than anything, right? Yeah. So you see American Indians, you read about their work, it's, I hate to say that, but it's pretty similar, right?
So we're getting to the last 5-10 minutes, and I'm not sure, but if people have questions, we can step up to the mic and you can address the questions to the room so that we can all hear them. And welcome anyone to step up to the mic and ask a question. Anyone feeling moved?
I just think I'll be terribly offended if you don't have questions.
Donna, do you want to, just so we can hear you?
Oh, I think you'll hear me. Can everybody hear me? Then I have to step
Yeah.
off people. Thank you. It certainly is an interesting concept to think about, and I never feel as myself as somebody who dreams. But listening to you, Robin, your purpose. Okay. So, oh, I'm sorry. So, but there's something that has me sort of feeling a disconnect, and that is when you talk about the dream that someone had, remembering a friend from 25 years ago. I can well understand that the connection can be remade because that person calls and says, even though it's been a long time, we've had this, I want to talk to you again. And I had this dream that made me remember you and how wonderful that was. And that is going to initiate something. And you talked about your mother. And your mother finally called you, and again, you're now initiating this. But I am lost in the concept that because I have a dream and I think about it and I try to see the emotion or the virtue of it, that I can actually make a difference unless I express it, unless I take that responsibility. And I'm just wondering where the issue is between my personal responsibility to move forward with this versus just hoping that somewhere out there somebody else is going to feel that connection. That's...
If you wake up in the morning and think of a person, that comes from a deeper place, right?
But it's my place.
Yeah, that's fine. So your place, and you're thinking of this person you haven't seen for 25 years. That's your dreaming that is now waking up and hearing that name. That's all I'm saying. It's like a telephone.
But then you refer to a telephone call that suddenly springs from that.
Yes.
And I see that as coincidence. I'm not sure that I see it as a
Well,
power trip.
one of the things that, and I completely understand, and one of the things you have to do, or if you're practicing this kind of work, is that you have to write it down and verify. I verified for years and years and years, to the point where I would hear, if you go out with this bracelet, you're going to lose it. Okay? I was willing to lose it to see if it was true, right? So I went on for years and years and years verifying. And I have all my students verifying. So I woke up with your name, and then 2 hours later you called. So I write it down in my book. I'm verifying. Because if you don't, you're not going to see the difference. You're not going to hear the difference between what the Bible calls the still small voice and your fantasy. You're not going to see the difference, right? So it's a complete and long process, although it appears very, very simple, and even, as you say, maybe ridiculous, right? You didn't say that, but no. I'm taking the word back because you didn't say it. No, you were saying that you couldn't quite grasp that it was more than a coincidence, right? But if you verify again and again and again and again, well, I'll tell you the end of the story of my mother and Colette, my teacher, which is that my teacher came from a very long lineage of Kabbalists, 800 years of Kabbalists. And they lived in the south of France. The great master was called Isaac the Blind, right? Many, many years later, I was traveling in France, and I get into a little bookstore, and I open a book that was about the Jews in the south of France. And there was my mother's name, family name. And I said, this is not possible. This is too much. So I went on a very long search and went into documents and all the rest, and finally talked to my cousin, and who said to me, yes, you're right. They lived and owned the land on which Isaac the Blind had his school, right? Now, why am I telling you that story? I can't remember, but there's a reason. Yeah, verification. And so I went to visit the place. The place was a mile away from the yeshiva that doesn't exist anymore, but there's still the town and there's still the cemetery, right? And so 800 years later, I was doing the work that my mother's ancestors had been doing, right? So that's why I'm saying that this language is much more mysterious and strange. And if we verify, we're going to get to verifications that astonish us, right? Now, I don't want to prove it to you, because that doesn't work. The only way it works is for you to do the practice, right? I'm just describing what the practice is. And I've seen this happening again and again with all the students who have similar story, not the same, but yeah.
Thank you very much for everything that you shared with us. I think we have a dream about the person, and the person shows up the next day on the phone or doesn't, and that's none of my business. But what I do want to mention, and maybe you said it and I missed it, about having a problem or something that is knotty and prickly in your head, a relationship or whatever it is, and going into an allowing energy rather than a demanding energy. For me, it works better to allow answers to come and just having a consciousness about the different sorts of energy that we put out in the world. And in our own sphere, allowing energy for one, and the other is learning to trust. And I don't know if you used that word trust and I missed it, but I think it's crucial. It's crucial for me to trust that the universe is in there with me and that a response will come, and it may come in the most peculiar, unexpected way. I've had a prickly sort of problem in my head for about a year, and this week on a podcast I was listening to, the person said the perfect sentence for that problem. Who would have known? I mean, and I just jumped out of my chair and said, that's it. That's where I've been off. That's exactly how I need to think about this. And it totally set me free. I have trusted that that would happen, that something would happen.
The word trust is very important, right? But we can only get it after long, long verification. Then people begin to trust how this works.
I
right?
like David Bohm, who's a quantum physicist, who says we live in a biofield. And so we're all connected all the time.
Yes.
And that vibration, one way or another, is all going to happen. But trust seems to me crucial.
I've even come to expect
What's
the
that?
solution to appear.
Yes, you must, you do, eventually. Thank you, yeah.
I think we have some questions online. Can we take a couple more? I know we're on time here, and I want to make sure that we get people on to their evenings, but
So there was a brief question here, then a longer format question. The brief question was, are emotions like reactivity?
Well, I think most of us react, right? And then we're unhappy that we've reacted. So that's emotion. Reaction is emotion. Right? Response is feeling. When I'm responding, then I'm in expansion and I'm in feeling, right? But when I'm in reaction, I'm in constriction, and so I'm in emotion. It is that word, right? Yeah. Thank you.
The other question was, how do you work with someone who is unable to visualize? Can thinking thoughts instead of visualizing still work?
This is, it's the mind blocking, and that's okay. There are 5 senses, at least we think there are only 5 senses. There are probably many more. But I have people who are body workers, and they do it all in touch, right? But soon it becomes a synergy of senses. So they can touch something and then they'll see. So there are ways and means of opening up the coming together of all the senses, right? When we talk imagery, we're really talking about all the 5 senses. But I have blind people work with me. It's astonishing what they accomplish. They can see perfectly clearly. They see the colors. I have one, she's one of our teachers. She's always beautifully dressed, color coordinated, right? She walks across town without an aid or anything. She's got the most beautiful images. So something happened and coordinated all the senses together, and she could see. Right? Yeah.
so are there any other questions?
But there is an exercise in the book on how to help you to see.
I think there's a related question there which might affect a number of people, which is, what if you ask for guidance from a dream, but then you wake up and don't remember the dream? What do you do?
You remain quiet. You just remain quiet, right? And it's possible that you just put that question, what was it? And you remain quiet, and suddenly, while your boss is talking to you about something really important, you suddenly have a flash of the dream come back to you. So don't panic. Be quiet, yeah.
You talked, that's okay, I can.
They can't even learn.
So you talked about with the image, you can move the energy. Can you expand upon that idea, talk about that again, because that seems to be the essence of so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, the image is your energetic field, if you want. Right? It will, if you persist, become manifest, right? But let's say it's the energetic field. Then I'll give you an example of somebody who's very sick, and none of the doctors knew what was happening with her. And I worked with her every day for the last 3 months, and now she's walking, talking, and acting, because she's an actress, right? And what we did was, nobody knew what the problem was, but she was paralyzed. She couldn't talk, and she was paralyzed, and she couldn't see. And so had her look into a mirror and ask, and the mirror became dark in certain spots. And we erased the darkness, right? And as the mirror became clearer and clearer, she got better. It's crazy. We did many other things, but that's how, basically, that was the beginning work, right? So we moved the energy in some ways that the body understood. I can't explain it to you any other way.
So you take something that is, and then you create a different image of what is.
You don't. You respond to the necessity of the image. If I see a mirror and I see myself, but there's a big dark place there in front of the liver, okay, I can wipe it with a cloth and it gets clearer and clearer. As I'm doing that, my body is actually doing that because it understands that language, right? And so we work with the energetic, which is the image, in the hope, of course, and in the intention that it will become manifest. Yeah.
So we're going to have to wrap it up. You can continue the conversation with Catherine in the book, because it's very accessible, and there are 150 exercises in the book that I think you'll find quite helpful and illuminating. And I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and this practice with us. I think you've given us a lot to ponder tonight, and hopefully everybody will have lots of interesting dreams to report tomorrow. Sorry? The books, yes. And Catherine will be signing books over there. If you want to pick one up as you go out, they're $20. So happy to take your name if you don't have the cash or checkbook. We'll find you later. And as we depart, I just want to close out with a favorite saying that we share at every session. May you be happy. May you be well. May you be safe. May you be peaceful and at ease until we meet again. Have a good night.